Hey, group, how's everybody doing?
What's up, guys?
How's it going? Welcome back, Nico.
Yeah, welcome. We missed you last week. We had a terrific podcast guest, Rick Solo, who's a man who our paths have crossed a million times apparently, and I never got to meet him, and I'm hoping to meet him in person, this spring.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun actually. The guy, he's been in the martial arts for decades and he's got a million great stories. Just met a million personalities. It ended up being really good. Yeah, you missed out, Nico. Hopefully you got to catch the show or will at some point. But yeah, we missed having you there because I'm sure you would have had some really good questions for him. But yeah, it was a great episode.
Well, we should see if you could do a part 2 with him.
Oh, for
Well,
sure.
For sure, part 3, part 4, because he was talking about bringing on students or associates that he's familiar with regarding other aspects of the martial arts and things in general. But I'm also thinking maybe one day we should try to get a bunch of people on at once. Let's say, 3 or 4 people that we know, Javier and, Brian and, along those lines, and just get like a group, and just kind of have like a little round table.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool, kind of like a tool and die roundtable, we'll call it, or something. All the old timers, just get them around and talk about those stories. Because I'm sure everybody remembers different parts of the stories too, differently. So getting everybody who can be available would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people suffering from burnout of things, and we're getting up there, in age, and when we start reflecting on, like with Javier and even you, Joe, we go back 20 years. That's, I mean, that may not be 50 years, but 20 years is still a good chunk of change. So yeah, there's a lot of stories and a lot of things that we should get recorded while we can.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one, I think, to me, one of the big benefits is that we get all these things down and archived, before we start forgetting the details. I think a lot of great stories have come up. And yeah, if we get even like outside people telling their stories, it's just a really cool thing to be a part of, to get these things, down on tape, as it were.
Well, speaking of the archive, yeah, I've been taking some time watching old interviews from like the 70s and, Dick Cavett, Johnny Carson, things like that, even Merv Griffin, whatever, and twofold to help me learn to be a better interviewer, because now we are getting guests that, well, like I may not be familiar with these people, so I can't sit there and talk to them, like old buddies, and could help my interviewing skills. But it also, it's fascinating to have these archives of some of these legendary actors or famous people, and I think we could actually have something similar, if not even better, because we're on the same page with many of these people. So what I mean by that is, Johnny Carson, let's say, may have had a person completely out of his entertainment strength on the show. Same with Dick Cavett, maybe a politician or whatever, an athlete or something. Whereas we tend to kind of stay focused in our little circle. So I think it would be great, to archive everything we can.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously, big personalities, they're going to make it onto the big national scene, and a lot of their stories are documented. But I mean, I think Rick really just proved that, even local kind of personalities and people just have amazing stories that are out there, the stories to be told. I mean, here's a lifetime of a guy who's, you know, lived and, basically dedicated his life to, a system in art and how he got there and how much time he spent there. I mean, there's just, like I said, it's kind of cool that we have this opportunity to, and the more people that we can get, I'm sure there's tons of, martial artists that we know either directly or indirectly who have just kind of amazing stories, just like his stories about, the seminar he took with Benny the Jet. I mean, I was just talking with our friend Jason Bender about it, and he was like, wow, that was so cool. I mean, these are little snippets of life in what we like to do and love to do that, you're not going to hear or read, it's only from, people from their individual stories where that gets out. So it's just kind of super cool to get those little stories and perspectives from people.
Well, I think one person we need to tie in with is Terry Dow out east, because he has that symposium that I used to go to and teach at, and I believe it's scheduled again for this month. I can't make it because I can't travel, but he knows so many uh, famous martial artists such as Bill Wallace and Michael DePasquale, and and on and on. So he would be the guy to really talk to. As I mentioned, I believe on last week's podcast, I tend to keep to myself. I don't affiliate with. I do my own thing. I'm by myself, kind of. So I don't know a million martial art guys, because I don't. I never really classified myself as a martial artist per se. I always look at myself as different realm, and so I never really felt like I was part of the clique. And Terry sure does know a lot of people. I mean, that's a fact.
Yeah, and it would be a good way for him to plug this thing he's got coming up too. So we should definitely get him set up.
But yeah, it'd be great.
So was it on one of these interview shows that you saw the thing with Orson Welles that you were talking about?
Well, yeah, Orson Welles, for those of younger generation who may have heard the name, don't know him, is probably most famous for being the writer, producer, director, and star of what's generally acclaimed as, if not the greatest movie, certainly one of the greatest movies of all time, and that's Citizen Kane. And he's just or was just a absolute fantastic man, known for his tremendous baritone voice. Did a lot of voiceovers, did a lot of commercials in the 70s and 80s. He died in 85. Large man, grew to a tremendous size, well over 400 pounds, it appeared. Magician. Uh, Man, hats off. The guy was married to Rita Hayworth, who's one of the most beautiful women that ever lived.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. He had a daughter with Rita, and yeah, just a startling, beautiful woman, who ironically became the first famous person publicized uh, of suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And she kind of unfortunately, kind of helped put Alzheimer's back on the map. For those of you who don't know, Alzheimer's is a relatively recent classification or discovery, I believe, 1906. And then for years, it was kind of swept under the table, almost kind of forgotten in a sense. And especially when I was a kid, people who were older and showed those symptoms were called senile, okay, senility and things like that. Well, it more than likely was Alzheimer's. But one of the and by the way, without getting back to Orson Welles, he was a tremendous storyteller. And you sometimes had to take certain things that he said with a grain of salt, but he was the most captivating voice and presence. Pardon me. And I believe it was Dick Cavett that asked him. Now, this is circa 1970. are there any great actors currently, again, currently meaning in the 70s, that have the power or the fame of some of the stars of the golden era? And Orson Welles, it was a very intriguing answer. He said no. And the reason being, he says, it's not for a lack of talent. It's not like the actors of that era right there, the 70s, were not as talented. It was no longer the biggest thing in the world to be a great actor. And as he went on to state, at the late turn of the 1800s, early 1900s, the most famous people in this country were opera stars. And as you mentioned, an opera star could walk down the street and people would literally faint. They would be so blown away. And then from there, the biggest thing to become was an actor or actress. Once the movies caught hold, that was like everybody wanted to be an actor or an actress. That was the biggest thing. And he said by the 70s, he's like, that's no longer the case, right? He said, now the biggest thing is a pop singer. Okay. So, and he was correct, by the time the 70s rolled around, you had, superstar singers, or, groups such as the Beatles and, before the Elvis and so on. And it got me to thinking that when I was growing up, as it related to sports, the greatest sports sportsman or title was the heavyweight champion of the world. Being a boxer, being the heavyweight champion of the world was the highest pinnacle in the sporting world. And it probably stacked up with being, the biggest superstar or singer or actor. When you think about guys like, Muhammad Ali, even George Foreman, Joe Frazier, these names were legend. And, that's, no longer the case. Sort of like Hollywood's golden era of acting. It's no longer there. And it may never come back again. The fight game, martial arts have never been that big, but yeah, there was the parallel there. And I saw that how as a kid, yeah, everybody wanted to be the heavyweight champion of the world, right? Or not every kid, but you get my point. And in Orson's day, it was to become a famous actor. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if he lived long enough or longer, if his answer would have changed. Because in some ways, I still see that kind of, hero worship and celebrity. When certain people hit a certain threshold, whether it's athletes. I mean, you think like LeBron. So you don't think LeBron is as big as the heavyweight champ of the world was in the 70s?
I believe now, yeah. My point is that the boxing has decreased, and yeah, and boxing is no longer the pinnacle of individual sport achievement in this country. It isn't. So yeah, Michael Jordan, who predates obviously MJ or LeBron, he took that mantle. He transcended the sport of basketball and took basketball as a sport probably to a new height. And before him, MJ, I keep saying MJ, Magic and Larry Bird, but Jordan took it to a whole different level.
Well, yeah, he was like internationally recognized. He really helped, I think, expand the sport all over the world. He just became iconic. So I don't know. Yeah, I wonder if Orson Welles is. I mean, as far as specifically to acting, I mean, there are still some actors or A-list celebrities who are just, ridiculously popular. I mean, and I still think probably most people, if you ask them, would still want to be, I mean, either like a, professional athlete or an actor. I mean, it just seems obvious. I don't know. The only thing I wonder if is different now is that, like back in the golden age of Hollywood, is that we weren't so prone to tear them down so much. So like, I think there's some disillusionment now. I mean, in some ways, we know that they're fallible humans, now that they're not these, kind of demigods or these, better than human characters. So, but I mean, there is a whole, I mean, if you look at the way the press works now, I mean, there's a whole industry cashing in on just digging up dirt on these people and kind of cutting them down, because I think that sells too. And I don't know, and I guess there was always kind of those, back in the day, those kind of, rag magazines or whatever that people would have, about scandals back in Hollywood and things like that. But I think maybe the what do you call it? The different studio heads and stuff were able to keep kind of lock any kind of controversies down. Well, maybe now people are just more exposed. So I don't know. I think celebrity has changed a little bit. Whether it's athletics or, the other arts or whatnot. But I mean, he was right. I mean, by the 60s and things, music had kind of, during that time, was at the forefront, maybe had, at least for a brief period, had superseded it. But I think it recedes. I think it's almost like a business cycle where, depending on the caliber of the artists, I mean, certain personalities, like, I mean, you mentioned the Beatles, that's like a kind of a once in a generation kind of phenomenon, and they fade away, and there's not necessarily someone who always can in that art realm that can fill that void. So it kind of comes and goes. I don't know. And maybe that's true with athletes. I mean, maybe there will be a boxer that captures the imagination again. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the last
I
heavyweight.
think it's all UFC fighters.
Yeah, but the UFC fighters still don't have that level of celebrity. 30 years ago, you could go pretty much anywhere and say, who's the heavyweight champ? And people would, Tyson or whoever, they'd know.
Well,
Now, yeah, you would be very hard pressed to find anyone who knows who the UFC heavyweight champ is, unless, they obviously follow MMA, but they're just not a household. And part of it is because, the UFC itself isn't accessible. It's pay-per-view events so much. Whereas when we grew up, you'd still see fights, championship fights now and then, on free television, no matter who the Hagler, Hearns, whoever, But getting back to Orson Welles, in the early days of Hollywood, it was a studio system. And it was a whole setup. It was literally like going to work. Whereas today, and not just today, but through the years it changed. Actors became more independent, so to speak, and kind of changed the whole culture of Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Hollywood guy. I have no personal insight. I've been to Hollywood a couple times, but not, well, acting related or anything. But yeah, it's a whole different. I've talked to people who are involved in Hollywood. I mean, I knew somebody who was a musician, but who actually did Hollywood movies. And when I was younger, and he told me how they groomed you, how to always look your best, never go outside unless you look like you're dressed like $1 million and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, nowadays, you see celebrities dressed in pajamas sometimes. They'll walk in the streets.
You mentioned Tyson, and actually, I think that's a good almost counter. You made a counter argument to yourself, though. I mean, because in the '70s, obviously you had Ali and Frazier, and those guys were, had the attention of the world. But I think Mike did too, and that was later. That was a later generation where he, because of the way he dominated in his performance. I mean, he was huge, and I mean, people still talk about him now.
Yeah,
I mean,
saying
forgotten him. So I just wonder if it just takes the right talent or personality in whatever it is, whether someday it'll be MMA or boxing again or whatever sport. Like we said, like it's LeBron now, but I think that potential is always there. I think humans kind of yearn for that. We get captivated by these kind of bigger than human personalities.
Well, I'm not saying the '70s were the cutoff for the heavyweight boxing. I'm just saying when I was a kid in the '70s, I wasn't a kid. I'm older than Tyson, but to me, Tyson was the last universal, that era Tyson Holyfield. I mean, I don't even know how many people know Riddick Bowe, okay, anymore, right? Tyson was, and still has the name, even though there's some, negativity at times attached to it. But Tyson also had the goods. I mean, he was a phenomenal fighter. But the point of it all wasn't getting into specifically this or that. It was just how the reason actors in the 20s and 30s were so popular, overwhelmingly popular, is because the acting profession was like the biggest thing, and that isn't as much because acting now, I think, has gotten so diluted and it's no longer centralized in Hollywood. I mean, acting happens, you know, everywhere. Even though back then it was more, you had only two options pretty much: the stage or go to Hollywood, you know, and then or radio, which wasn't a visual media. Now actors, not just now, but for generations since, acting has been widespread. New York, wherever, it's interesting. I Have you ever thought about acting, Nico?
Not really, because I'm probably the worst guy to be on this podcast because I'm not into pop culture at all, and not really into actors or hero worship or any of that. I don't even watch. A lot of people ask me because they know that I've been doing martial arts, a long time and different arts, and everybody asks me, "Oh, so about the next UFC fighter, what do you think about this guy? What do you think about that guy?" And they're so shocked because my answer is always, "I don't even know who he is. I don't watch it. I don't care about the UFC. I don't care about really anything in pop culture." But I'm interested in the arts and training and the techniques, and I've trained with some guys that were at UFC level and in the UFC, but I don't care about it at all. Um, so as far as acting, there are some actors that I think are really good actors, but I don't idolize them at all, and I don't really care who's popular.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of the modern actors or actresses or comedians, and I don't stay abreast with that. I tend to like the old classics because what I what I grew up with. We were very limited, to a degree. Probably you two, Nico, definitely Joe. We didn't have 70, 80, or 100 whatever different channels you have now, like on cable. We had three, ABC, NBC, CBS, and then we had PBS and a UHF channel. Sometimes we only had one, sometimes two. Not a lot of choices. But my whole point wasn't to really focus the show on acting. It was just to use Orson Welles and how he mentioned that, how there was a time in this country where acting was super big, and that time has passed. And just like sports, probably in the 20s, baseball, Babe Ruth was the first, mega athlete. And to this day, his name is still synonymous with baseball. And trends, it's basically trends, uh,
Yeah,
that's really what it is.
I think the same thing applies with martial arts. The cycles and the trends, like wrestling and boxing. Those are like universal, probably some of the first ones ever. But then I remember when karate was extremely popular and kung fu with all the movies and stuff. It was popular, and then after the first UFC, the new trend went to BJJ. You see BJJ schools popping up everywhere, and I think the trend is moving too. I think it's going more to personal protection now and away from sport due to increase in violence and turbulence. I think that's going to be the new trend.
That's an interesting observation because you're right. I mean, there was a very clear. I mean, most of people who are familiar with martial arts history kind of knows that there was a almost like every decade or so there was a new art that was kind of the popular thing. So I think it was like in the 50s after World War II, it was judo, right? Because a lot of the guys were coming back from the Pacific and they had picked up judo and then karate. And eventually, right, the 70s, it was kung fu because of, the kung fu TV show and Bruce Lee. They were huge. And then it was ninjas. That was a big thing in the 80s,
Yeah,
right?
I forgot the ninjas. Yeah, I remember
Ninjas, man. Come on.
with the
That
Ninja
keeps the pump
Turtles,
in.
man. I always wanted to be a ninja.
True, man. If you're going to be something, be a ninja, right? But I almost wonder if that's like in some ways, this is the thing I kind of speculate is that all those, it's weird that it came kind of almost full circle because judo, which is a lot like BJJ. I mean, they're so similar. I mean, um, I mean, there's obviously differences, but it seems like it's almost come full circle. It's come back to rediscovering that and grappling in general. I mean, I think there's been finally, obviously, I don't think I'm stating the obvious here, but there's a new appreciation for boxing and wrestling as a martial arts. A lot, and thanks to the UFC and things like that. But I mean, where else is there left to go? I think in some ways, and maybe, and this is kind of what's interesting is there something else out there, over left to discover, or are we kind of in the new, kind of in that final stage of it, where this is kind of we've achieved what we're going to see? I mean, I think there might be subtle shifts where it seems like over time boxing and wrestling are continuing to kind of grow as far as respect in the fighting arts. I mean, Muay Thai was like, we had Rick on here, but back in the 80s when he and I were first doing it, it was like a secret no one had ever heard of, and now that's definitely become mainstream. People know it, you know. Maybe not my mom per se, but I think anybody who's interested in self-defense and fight sport knows it. And so, is there anything else out there left to discover, or is there going to be another major shift where something else becomes huge again, or has that ended too?
Well, it
Well,
has to. It has to. It's just everything goes in cycles. It's not that you're going to discover something new, but there's going to be a cycle where something else becomes popular.
Or like rediscover, I guess. Like, are we ever going to rediscover karate again? Is that ever going to come to the forefront? Or has that kind of, I mean, there'll always be people practicing karate and it's always going to be an international sport. But for a time, when you said martial arts, to people's minds, that meant karate, you know? And, I don't know if that's going to be the case as more. Now it's just kind of, it's kind of achieved its peak in the popular consciousness. And, is there going to be someday a karate star, maybe who does something awesome in the UFC, who regains attention to that? I mean, they've had a few fighters who are, a lot of them actually have some karate background, but they're not purely karate fighters. They're definitely, everybody's there is obviously mixed and has grappling experience. So it gets a little bit of attention, but, will it ever come back to that prominence that it had, like, let's say back in the 60s?
we don't know. I mean, if there's a way to make money off of something, somebody will promote it. I mean, in when I say making money, it doesn't even necessarily mean in competition. It's just about marketing. So, like your Thai boxing, that was around, long before the 80s. Aaron Banks out of New York, who was a promoter, used to do his, I believe, what he called the Oriental World of Self Defense shows. And he had, you know, boxers versus kickboxers, Thai boxers, this and that. He put on shows with some of these obscure arts. The I don't want to say the word problem, but the thing was it wasn't marketed at such a level that it caught on across the whole country, let alone the whole world. With the UFC, they caught lightning in a bottle. The promotion, it got exposed, but the UFC came around at the right time, meaning with the existence of cable television and pay per view, you could put this show, in everybody's house. I don't believe if you took it into the mid 70s, the UFC would not have been on television. I don't think there would have been enough interest for a network to say, oh, yeah, well, it might have been a one shot deal. But with it being pay per view, there really wasn't any risk. you know, I guess the promoters, the Gracies, were, if anybody, were the ones who were at risk with the money. So timing is everything, you know. That's just how I look at it. And to throw it back to movies for a moment, apparently there were some silent movie stars that when the talkies became popular, the silent movie stars, their careers, some of them ended because they didn't have the voice that would have been, you know, good enough for talking pictures, which is another interesting concept. So there is a point in time where timing kind of hurt some of those old time actors. Um, anyway, yeah, it's interesting. We don't know what's down the line, but I think Nico's onto something with the self protection. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I remember how bad the times were in the '70s. Uh, so I just think we're getting back to maybe that era where it's, pretty rough times. People are going to do what they have to do. Maybe that'll be the next, the next big cycle in martial arts, is getting back to strictly reality-based stuff. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like, and that makes a lot of sense in some ways, because that's maybe the one area of martial arts that is probably the most neglected. Like, I think part of the, one of the big things with the UFC and why it's influenced kind of, martial arts culture across the globe is that I think a lot of fighters were neglecting grappling and things like that. And it really revolutionized things. It really put a spotlight on that and changed the way people thinking of it. And because a lot of, not everybody, obviously, clearly you were grappling since the 70s, and there's a lot of, there was a whole culture of it out there, but it didn't have mainstream acceptance. They always talk about people who are yelling at the ring saying, "Hey, get up and fight," and get off the ground and things like that. Like, people just either couldn't comprehend what they were seeing or didn't want to see it, and it took a while for people to accept that, yes, you also, striking is important, but you also need to be able to grapple. And but I just wonder if, that next evolution, or the thing that maybe the opportunity is that area where we're kind of neglecting. And like you said, I mean, in some ways, combat sports, which are obviously central to martial arts skills, but they're not the only thing there. I think even like last week's conversation with Rick, it's like, hey, sometimes your ring skills are not going to be enough. Don't just assume that because you have ring skills or mat skills, that you're going to be 100% safe. He talked about some like parking lot fights where it was just like, you may be good, but you can get in a lot of trouble in those circumstances. And I think that's something that we've talked about a lot here, but maybe that makes sense, that's the thing that needs to come to the forefront, and once maybe some event, or whether it's, in the news or historical, maybe that will be what captures it. Because I do think that and maybe that's where it comes full circle, because a lot of times back in the day, I think martial arts were always associated with that. And maybe it's kind of drifted away from that.
Well, I don't know. I agree with what you're saying. I can tell you that in my little corner of the world, when I was a kid growing up, because of everybody was exposed to violence. I think now what's happening is people that really were never truly exposed to violence, like violence never really hit home with them. Now it's starting to hit home because, you read about it or hear about it on a daily basis. But I can tell you in my little corner of the world, for the people who were around violence, they're like, your karate shit ain't going to help you. Karate or martial arts, but they would say karate. The people who actually saw how violence went down knew that martial arts isn't going to help you. Okay. It isn't like the martial art movies. You're going to get shot. It's going to be 3-on-1. It's going to be 4-on-1. There's going to be weapons all over the place. So I think that may be the biggest awareness that may happen to some people. They may finally wake up and say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, this stuff isn't enough. This martial arts training alone, isn't enough. We have to take it in a different direction. And that could be learning weaponry or just learning a different way of fighting or approach. Who knows? You know, hell, if I was raised in a suburb somewhere and didn't see what I saw in my lifetime, I probably wouldn't even have gotten involved in this stuff to begin with, but I certainly wouldn't have had the zeal or the zest to, worry about self-defense. I would have just figured, well, I can handle myself and that's good enough. I never had that kind of attitude because I knew it's never good enough. You always have to stay on your toes. So I think that might happen to a lot of people. They may finally become aware, oops, I got to do different. I got to, train more or train differently.
Yeah, I think part of why MMA is so appealing to everybody is it seems to be like the most realistic way to train in a controlled environment, because it just seems like a lot of these self-defense schools, they're not really doing like they're not really sparring, and it doesn't seem like a realistic scenario. There's a lot of like, this guy does this, and it depends on which school, obviously, but more like mechanical, I guess you could say, to whereas like MMA just, it's, you actually do it live. So I think that's what appeals to some people, not just, the glamorization of the sport. Is there a way to turn self-defense, I mean, more into like a live scenario where you're doing live sparring? I mean, obviously you could add ripping and into the grappling, but you really can't take it too far. Is there a way that you could shift the image of it and make it more palatable for people?
Well, even if I gave you the answer, even if it's all about promotion. There, I thought I had a good way of training. I'm sure there's other people out there that may have a good way of training, but we're individual people without a larger voice. Uh, Again, it's all about promotion. And right now, for the last 20 some years, the UFC type fights, MMA fights have been getting, the bulk of the promotion. So that's what's in everybody's mind. That's what they see. That's what they hear. Uh, so even if there was a perfect solution, if it gets drowned out, who's gonna take advantage of it? It's a sticky wicket. It's a difficult thing. I don't know. I know that talking when I was a young kid, talking to old guys, that box, like really like 40, 50 years older than me, they did all that sparring contact, not necessarily wrestling. It didn't matter though. They threw punches and took punches. They knew what it was like to be physical. Um, and there's a lot to that. And there were kids a few years older than me that I met that did karate-ish, style, no contact, karate, and they never learned what it's like to dish it out or take it. You know what I'm saying? It was always point karate stuff, pull your punches, and you actually got chastised if you made contact. And now this is not every school. I'm just saying, but in the kids that I knew, they did a lot of that, point karate stuff. So I don't know. I'm going to continue to do what I do, because I feel what I do encompasses this. But my voice is just I'm one little speck, in 7 billion people. So you know how it is.
You need your own promotion, Tony. I think you hit the nail on the head with the promotion.
Yeah, it is, and that's one thing I've never been good at. I don't promote, like I don't market. Like I told you, I kind of keep to myself, and I don't do one of these circle jerk things where everybody gets together and it starts to go viral. I don't know any other concept. I did, like I said, I spent 3 or 4 days trying to study it with Tom Antion, but I'm just that it's not my this is not my strong suit. I'm not and believe me, I've been at this for 25 years or so. if I haven't figured it out by now, I'm not going to figure it out. Yeah, I mean, shit.
Well, and don't forget, I mean, the UFC, if I'm not mistaken, like early 2000s was going to go bust. Like they were not, people didn't want to watch that, for whatever reason, especially, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, this is kind of simplifying the history of it, that they really captured popular imagination more so outside of the martial arts community when they did that reality TV show, right? So now they could have like, they'd get everybody in a house and there'd be some pseudo drama. And basically they got the people who could care less about fighting to watch, so they could have the personal story. So they had someone to root for. And that's part of I mean, there's kind of two aspects. Yeah, if you're going to be like nationally famous or get up to that level, in some ways especially for an obscure sport or something that is not well known, the way to break through, that was the magic formula for them, is the reality TV thing. And that's where I think it just got huge. I mean, it was big, but it was, like I said, it wasn't enough to be a sustaining business. I think real violence and real things like that, not a lot of people have an appetite for it.
They changed the rules or the focus, and they, to a degree, de-emphasized this unending grappling on the ground where nothing was happening and spectators were getting, bored to death. They made it more action packed with the strikes. And, I remember, I don't know if they still do, because like Nico, I really don't follow it, but they used to give, bonus money for quickest knockouts or something like that, just whatever, trying to get the flash, to make it more spectator, friendly, because, it was getting to the point of monotony, just seeing how it used to be. Now it's, it's more to the taste of the spectators. The spectators enjoy what they see now. And, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the whole point. Listen, they do this with everything. They've changed the rules in football. They've changed the rules in baseball. Baseball, because, they say people's attention spans are so much shorter now. Baseball, they try to speed up the game. And I still hear complaints from people that I love baseball, but for many people, it's like watching baseball is like, watching a car rust. It's just too slow paced.
That's how I feel about watching baseball.
Right?
I have a buddy, this is a digression, but not only does he watch baseball, but he's so into it, he'll watch replays of baseball games he's already seen. That's hardcore, man.
Well, yeah. Well, you see, now first of all, the thing about baseball that appealed to me, it was a summer sport, spring and summer, right? But baseball was every day, okay? It was always on. In my lifetime, 162 games. And before me, 154 games. That's a lot. And even if they weren't on television, you had the radio. And radio, I miss radio, because the one thing about radio is it tapped into your imagination. A game could be so enjoyable, maybe even a radio program like a mystery theater or something could be so awesome, because it was the same program could be completely different for Nico, for you, and for me. So, for example, if they're talking about a horror show, right, on radio, we really don't know what that creature looks like. It's up to our imagination to make that picture connected. And my picture would be different than Nico's, and Nico's would be different than yours, perhaps. And that's how it was with for me when I would listen to radio baseball. I could a swing and a miss. I could imagine how bad that batter swung and missed. Where in reality, it might have just been a check swing. Who knows, right? So I miss that. But in baseball, it was part of our youth. We all played baseball. I don't see kids doing that much anymore around here. But yeah, that was the thing to me. Baseball was just it'll always have a spot in my heart, you know.
Going back. Oh, go ahead, Nico.
I was gonna say, going back to Joe's point earlier, which that was a really good point about the reality TV show and how it captivated, a broad audience and brought back the UFC ratings. And for me, I could care less about watching the UFC, but to me that was interesting because I get to see their training. I get to see the personalities of the coaches, what the coaches are telling them and stuff like that. That made it really intriguing to me. Like I would watch any of those episodes with no problem. So I think Tony needs to start his own reality TV show.
Hey, there we go. I should have been an actor, right? I'll do the Orson Welles School of Catch Wrestling, man. Shit. Hey, if all my students were as big as Orson Welles, you couldn't get your arms around them, the body line them. But here I remember there was a brief time, and I can't give you specifics. I might have been 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, something. And they used to once a week broadcast these old radio, Lux Theater, and just old radio programs. And when I was a kid, I'm like, I don't want to sit here listening to this. I want to watch television. I want to see things, right? But then I as I started to get a little bit older, not a lot older, but let's say 14, 15, I started to appreciate that. And when I was able to, do, part-time job, I remember buying a couple cassette tapes of, it was called old time radio programs. And I would, probably 45 minutes per side. And I would actually listen to it. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. That's obviously 30, 20 years before the internet or whatever. And yeah, that's the thing. Imagination. And it helps our creativity. And like Nico just said right now, oh, Tony, that's what you need to start your own reality show. See, my mind doesn't work like that anymore. I don't have that, I guess, that imagination that I used to have, that creativity, like Nico just brought that idea up. I never would have even thought about that, So that's something that I probably need to work on again, is my creativity or my imagination to come up with things.
Yeah, I think what you were saying, like with the listening to the audio stories and stuff, I think a lot of kids are missing out on that now. And you're right. It engages your imagination. Also, like reading a book, to me, that really engages your imagination, And I think with all the technology, it seems to be a neglected thing with especially the new generation. But I think they're really missing out in that aspect.
Well, I remember reading once just a passage talking about this young girl and so on, and she was attractive, and the point is, it was in a book, and yes, the girl was attractive. The girl was absolutely startling beautiful because I created that image. Okay, now if I would have seen it in a movie, I might have said, she's really not that pretty. Or how can they say she's attractive? And it would have dulled the story. So I agree with you there, Nico. When you can read a book, you can create. You can actually give an addendum to the author, meaning whatever the author was trying to convey, you are going to construct it in such a way to make it either palatable for yourself or not. And I used to love to read, and then I got into just reading like technical nature stuff, like science and things like that. But I remember enjoying reading certain books, and now it's hard because my eyes, I can't see very well. Anytime I'm doing anything, I got to have these old man. I told you, without these, I'm Mr. Magoo. I can't see anything. So, but yeah, it is about the mind. And don't get me wrong, there are some brilliant young minds out there. Children are still our only hope in this world, right? And there are some amazing talents that need to be nurtured. Um, and it's up to people our age, your age, Nico, to encourage them and bring them along. And one of the best ways of doing it is by setting an example. That was the one thing that I always had a problem with when I was a kid. If an old timer could actually do it, then I would listen. If I found an old timer that couldn't do anything, you're preaching. I'll wait till Sunday when I go to church and I'll hear, the father, the pastor, do his preaching. So that's just how it worked with me. I was always a show me kind of guy. And I'm sure to a degree you guys are too, but yeah, I mean, that's something I probably should do. Maybe this weekend, just go get a book, read a book.
Readers make leaders, Tony. I think OJ.
Well, I have a lot of books upstairs actually that I, should get back at. Hell, I have a couple of books in my bedroom that I have sitting there because I kept saying I'm going to read them, and they're books that I've read before, but they would be interesting to read again. One of them is The Color of Money, which, by the way, the book was much better than the movie, and it's been sitting in my bedroom for 9 months. It just was very hard for me when my mom was here to get away and absorbed in a book because I have to kind of pay attention to her. So I need to block out time, where I can just dedicate it to the book so I can immerse myself in it.
Well, before I forget, I was going to say, I mean, hope springs eternal we were talking about kids and old time radio shows, but actually my son Ben, when we were on the road trip, he actually found ways to stream old time radios. So on the car while we were driving, they were playing like the old mystery things like The Shadow and other old radio programs. But you can still, that stuff is out there. And in some ways, the technology, like they're always worried about kids being on their phones. And granted, he's not a kid anymore; he's a young man in his early 20s. But I mean, in some ways, that technology does make it more easy to get that stuff. Like you said, you had to go out and get a tape of it. You had to come across it in a record store or something. But now, if kids are curious, a lot of that media, now some of it's lost forever, unfortunately. A lot of those recordings are just gone. But at least a good portion of them, you can actually stream them online. You can find archives of them. So that's another thing you can hunt down too, Tony. But you can literally stream that stuff off your phone now. So on the flip side, technology does make those things more accessible. You just have to know to go look for them.
I was able to get through my library. They have an app where you can basically rent audiobooks, and some of them are like online books that you read, and they're all free, and you get a certain amount you can take out every month, and that's a good way. You could probably access some of those old stories like Tony was talking about through that site. And I don't know if your local library may offer something similar. But I started doing that because I figured I'm spending so much time driving to and from job sites, and all that time driving was basically just wasted time. So I just started figured out how to get those audiobooks and listen to a book during my drive, so it's not wasted time. I'm actually learning something.
Well, yeah, I have to be very careful because I've been accused, rightfully so, by many people of living in the past. So if I get lost in these radio shows from 1940, I'll it'll be like entering the Twilight Zone, but that's okay. I need to get away from the current events. I do about a year or so ago. Well, for many of you who know me, my favorite movie, well, I say that, but it depends on your mood, but has always been The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946. And on YouTube, they did a radio after the movie came out. Dana Andrews, who's one of the stars, he did a radio program of The Best Years of Our Lives. He was the only actor from the movie in it. There was other new actors on the radio program, and it was condensed. You know, the movie was quite a long movie. It was over 2 hours. This radio program was much shorter. And I found that interesting. I didn't find it anywhere near as compelling as the movie because, you know, it was short. I don't think if you saw them, if you didn't see the movie, you probably would kind of get a little bit lost. But yeah, I'm going to do that, Nico and Joe. I will look up, uh, you know, some interesting programs. You know, I even remember they believe they had a Sherlock Holmes thing. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, you could check your local library too, because you may be able to just rent them for free through this through
I
the
have
app.
no local library.
Really?
I have no local. I have no local
Man,
library.
I thought
I
I was
mean,
in the sticks.
yeah. I mean, this is so bad. You know, I'm waiting for Mr. Haney and, you know, Ava Gabor to come up. You know, with Green Acres and shit. Okay, no, I'd have to go to another town, and I don't know. You know, if I can even do that. You know, it's crazy. I mean, right? I mean, shit. Oh wow. How could I? Well, how could this ever happen to me? Right? Uh, but yeah. And no, there's no such thing as a farmer's daughter out here. Sorry to bust everybody's bubble. I wish. Um, yeah. See, like I like old music, right? I always have. Big band era, uh, jazz, this and that, and even the music. You know, rock. You know, 70s, 80s. That's probably the end of it. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't like more contemporary songs, but you know, 70s and 80s, that's my end. I wasn't a big fan of the 50s rock and roll too much. Um, some 60s was great. But yeah, I do I like the old stuff. You know, I really do. Movies, oh my goodness. I I haven't watched a movie in long story, but I haven't watched a movie in a long time. I wish I need to start doing that again.
Theaters are starting to open up now, finally again. The one down the street from me, I think April 15th, the Tivoli. That's one of the big local ones here, but that's finally opened up. I think, yeah. So I think people are going to start going back to the show a lot. So who knows?
Oh, I think it's been oh, I don't remember the last time I've been to a movie theater. I don't. It's been certainly not since I lived here. It's maybe 15 years ago. Um, maybe longer than that since I've gone to a movie.
We talked about going to see the movie Creed at one time, but no, we didn't pan out. That was the last time I remember talking about movies with you.
Oh, okay. I think I do know the last. Okay, this movie was? I went with Kevin and Jeannie, his wife. Kevin Spacey was in the movie. It was a weird movie. There was some, I don't even remember the name of the movie. You guys know it. One of the characters was a former DI Marines, and it turns out that he put the make on a guy. It might have won the Oscar.
Oh, American Beauty? Was
Yeah,
that?
yeah. What year did that movie? That's the last movie I ever saw. What year did that movie come out?
Geez, I'll have to look it up, but that was a
Yeah,
while ago. Yeah, hold on a second.
that's the last movie I've ever seen in a movie theater. I had no idea I didn't even care to go see the movie. I just wanted to go. We were going to go out for dinner after the movie, Kevin and Jeannie. I said, yeah, sure, I'll go to the movie. You know, that's fine. That's actually the last movie that I ever saw. Could that be 15 years ago? I mean, I have no idea when it came out.
Holy shit, Tony, it was 1999.
You're telling me 22 years? That There you go. You talk about you don't like pop culture, Nico? I mean, come on. I mean, shit. I haven't gone to a movie in 22 years.
Yeah, it's probably been almost the same time for me too.
I mean, come on, man. I remember I went to with a couple of the guys I was training, we went and saw one of the Rocky flicks, you know, and then I remember one of the girls I dated, we saw the Titanic. That was the only movie we ever saw. And how fitting it had to be Titanic. You know, our relationship sunk just like the ship. You know, my luck. So you know that's about it. Okay. I don't. You know, I don't go to movies.
I'm still just trying to picture you and Kevin watching American Beauty. That's a movie I would not see the two of you guys hanging out and watching.
No, because Jeannie wanted to go see it. That was his wife. She's like, she wants to go see the movie. Kevin's like, come on, Duber, let's go. We're gonna go get some pizza afterwards. You know, yeah, okay, anything for pizza. You know, shit, I didn't have to drive. Let's go. I had no idea. I actually thought this is how stupid I was. I thought it was a Disney movie. You know, like Sleeping Beauty. I thought we were gonna go see a cartoon. I had no idea. I show up and then I'm like, I didn't, you know, and I tried to take a nap during the movie, and Jeannie kept elbowing me, stay awake, stay awake. You know, I'm like, God, you know, let me be. Yeah, I'm not into that kind of that. You know, I'm very particular with the kind of movies I like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how much violence or punching there is. There was some gun violence, but not like kind of hand-to-hand stuff that you like.
No, I just remember that girl, that young chick. She, you know, that's basically all I can. That was the highlight to me. I'm not into that other stuff. I mean, you know, I never even knew who the hell Kevin Spacey was. I never heard of the guy.
Well, I
And
got
I
some
don't,
bad news for you. Yeah, his career hasn't gone in a positive direction since you saw that movie, but that's a story
well,
from.
no, I mean, I heard about that. Yeah, I mean, because that was all over the news a few years ago. But you know, maybe if I was an actor, you know, maybe if I would have done even like local theater. I mean, I did acting in like grade school, you know, but that was like I think I played Joseph the carpenter, you know, Jesus's father or something. I might have even played Jesus. I mean, that could have been. Who knows? You know,
Tony is Jesus. I'd like to see
yeah,
that.
it probably was because I was like the big time altar boy in Catholic school. So I remember, yeah, I may have played Jesus. I don't recall, but I do remember
You
having to
wouldn't go
rehearse.
down. The thing is, they try and crucify you. You'd put up a fight. There's no way you'd take it like.
Yeah, well, I didn't. This is before I started training. We're talking third grade here or some shit. I don't know, but I do remember always having to practice singing those songs and everything and learning them in different language, you know, different language. And oh man, you know, I mean, here's an Italian kid, you know, in an basically an all black neighborhood learning Polish Christmas carols. I mean, go figure that one out. You know, the weird upbringing. But speaking of weird upbringings, let's circle this back because before the show, Nico, before you logged on, I was telling Joe that Orson Welles actually kind of has a connection around here. He was born in Kenosha, excuse me, Wisconsin. Left when he was an infant, and was basically raised in Chicago and Woodstock, Illinois. I guess he spent about 4 years in Woodstock, and kind of interesting. So you know, basically the general, you know, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin area. I guess he spent time in Madison, Wisconsin, and everything. It's kind of interesting because he does not come off at all as a Midwest guy. You know, he's got that deep, you know, oh, the French, you know, when he was drunk doing that, you know, commercial for Paul Masson. We will sell no wine before it's time. The guy was awesome. You guys got to look that shit up. It's classic.
Was that the same town where they filmed Groundhog's Day up by you?
Woodstock, yeah. Yeah. I knew somebody who appeared in that movie. And now I won't mention her name, but she did not have anything good to say, about Bill Murray. And I guess he gave Andy McDowell and a lot of people a hard time on that. But again, matter of fact, I think he broke up with his best friend. What was his Harold Ramis over that? He was
really?
just going through, yeah, he was going through some hard times. Bill Murray. Yeah, apparently he was a little bit difficult. But if you go to Woodstock, there's that restaurant. There was a scene, several scenes in the restaurant. They still have pictures there. The bowling alley is still there. The town where he jumped out of the clock tower, all that stuff's still there. Woodstock really hasn't changed, that much since they filmed that movie.
So it's clear, though, talking about Groundhog Day that you watch movies, you just haven't gone out to the movies per se.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't go to theaters, but I mean, I watch movies. I just I don't go to theaters. But Groundhog Day, I mean, I've watched that so many times that I thought I was in Groundhog Day. Okay, it's like every day I would watch the movie again. It was just like, wait a minute, am I really watching a movie, or is it Groundhog Day? It's interesting. We don't know,
It's
but I
true.
had to see that
I
movie. At
feel
least.
like I've been on this podcast over and over again for sure.
Well, I know your hair's growing, so I
That's
mean,
how we know time has changed.
yes, your hair.
I'm
Uh,
glad you finally mentioned it. You know, you kept mentioning your vision, and I was like, it must be the vision because he hasn't said anything today. I thought I was having a particularly good hair day, and was pretty excited to have it recorded, archived, just like the stories of martial arts masters of yesteryear. This too should be archived, I think.
Well, speaking of archives, yes, I think so. And, ladies and gentlemen in the listening audience, we normally film our podcasts Sunday morning and, we go live. But now, because of Nico's work schedule, uh, we can't do that often. Now, we did last Sunday because Nico wasn't able to appear and we had a guest. But this will be, you folks will be watching this on Sunday, although it's Thursday night when we're filming this. Hence, I'm just sitting back relaxed because it's already late when we're filming this and I didn't feel like setting everything up. But yeah, we really should start archiving these things, talking things, because the technology exists. And as I was mentioning to earlier about watching these interviews, I've watched them, to learn how to interview. And basically, the best way to interview is to shut up. That's what I like about Dick Cavett. He just asks a pertinent question and then sits back and lets the guy talk. But the audience, these were live audience. The audience was so different back then. They were quiet. They would listen. They could sit there and have the guest talk for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes uninterrupted, and they kept the audience's attention. Um, so that's awesome that we can see these clips from the 70s or the 60s or what have you. And that's why we need to do this while we still can, because then there'll be a time when we should have done it. It's too late. Joe got his hair cut and had a nervous breakdown over it. Now he's gone, and
Once it's cut, it's done, fellas. That's it.
you're like Samson, right?
Oh, we should do a special episode where we hold
Oh my
Joe
goodness.
down, tie him down, and I'll shave his head.
This is a great idea. We could
I'll
do
give you.
fundraise-
Don't worry, Joe. I'll give you a fade, Joe. I know how to give fade.
Well, then I'll hold him down, and you cut his hair then.
Yeah,
No?
I think this is some potential. Here's the reality show. I think we've got our pilot episode.
there you go.
Yeah, I remember at the gym one time, Vince, he's on my fundamentals of the jab or video, foundations of the jab video. He needed a haircut. Right? I had the clippers. I said, sit down. Well, he wasn't sitting still. He looked like a skunk. He had this big, like a mohawk almost. It was, I felt. And then when I was done, he's like, how's it look? I'm like, yeah, well, okay, well, let's go, man. It's getting late, man. I didn't want to look at the mirror. He went to work the next day. They're like, what the hell happened to you? And he worked at like big advertising agency in Chicago. Like, who did this to you? Tony, man. Oh God. So yeah, it was. And then shortly after my dad died, they have here, for those in the listening audience who may not know, there's a thing called St. Baldrick's where you get your head shaved bald and you donate your hair they make wigs. Cancer is what it's all about, cancer. So see Vince, Johnny Rice, and myself, we went to a place long gone now called Higgins. They shaved our head, and a lot of you guys like Nico. You look tough with your head. You look great, right? Man, I look like a hard-boiled egg that just didn't get boiled long enough or something, man. I look like shit.
I think the listening audience wants a picture. I think that needs to go up on the Instagram.
Oh my God,
I
never.
can't even picture, like, you're like the Fonz, man. I can't imagine you let anybody touch your hair.
Yeah,
Especially,
well, it was for a good cause. I mean, there's always a reason, right? And this was for cancer, to fundraise. You collect money. Oh, we'll pay money to see him get his hair cut, and all that money goes to charity. So it was worth it, and so I did it. That was back in, well, my dad died in December of 2012, so that was
so it's kind of like your
2000.
tribute to your dad, kind of like not
Well,
a tribute, but like kind of motivated by.
yeah, I mean, I mean, nothing is going to would have brought him back, but if it could help somebody else, right? Even if it's sometimes people think,
Inspired
oh, I
by
don't.
this.
Well, it's again, it's like these small voices all becoming unison, and now you got one large voice. So you may not be able to donate $1 million, but if you can contribute whatever, 10, 20, $5, whatever, and you get 10,000 people that can do that, now all of a sudden there's some good that can be done. But yeah, I need to keep my hair as long as I can. That's all I got. That's
So
all
yeah,
I got
as
left.
far as promotion and getting attention, I think that would definitely get some attention on social media. So keep that in mind, Tony. Hunt those
Yeah,
pictures
right.
down. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
I did so one time Casey, he's my oldest son now, but he was just a kid. We went out to his grandma, no shit, his great grandmother's farm. And long story short, he came back with something that was like lice or something. He was out playing where he shouldn't have been playing. He had stuff in his hair and he was little, so he was, and we're like, uh-oh, like we saw something crawling around and it was like, we're shaving his head now. And he was a little scared or whatever. We got the clippers out. I'm like, hey, you know what? Do me first. I had never shaved my head before. So I sat there and like, Casey, we're going to do this together. Watch your old man. And so I sat in the chair and Sasha shaved my head. And then it was like a game for him. And then we did his. Man, we looked like a Krishna cult afterwards. Like around for like, like it was not, it was fun for like, a half an hour. And then like, yeah, 6 months of, people giving us little donations on the side of the road and stuff. But it was funny. But yeah, no, I'm also not, as good as I look here, it's the exact opposite with that shaved head. I do not have that shaved head look. I don't think. Just
I don't want to say anything. Okay, I don't want to really get into this because it's kind of controversial. But like when I was a kid, there were old people, old timers. You didn't get your head shaven. Okay, that was something you just didn't do. Like today, it's the cool thing to do because that was a bad time in world history. When where they came from? They came from this Holocaust stuff, and that it was symbolic. It was something you just normally didn't do. And so when I was a kid, there was only two famous people that had that look going on, and that was Telly Savalas and Yul Brynner, if you remember Yul Brynner. Uh, Generally, that wasn't happening until Michael Jordan kind of popularized that big time. But yeah, I don't want to get rid of my hair. Now, my dad, when he died, he had hair like this. I mean, he full head of hair. So I hopefully will take after him. Um, if not, oh well. I don't think I have that many years left anyway, so I don't know what difference does it make.
Yul Brenner was
Like,
cool, man. He was a
who?
cool actor. Yul Brenner, he was cool. I just watched him in the Magnificent Seven, probably, I don't know, a month ago or so. But he was definitely cool. That was a great movie. Um,
Well, there was a
yeah,
lot of cool actors back then. But part of the reason they're cool is because we didn't get to know everything there was about them, and a lot of what their publicity, their bios was bullshit. It was hype. So there was some mystery to them. I think now many celebrities, including athletes, we tend to know, I think, a little too much about them, and the mystique is kind of going. That's my opinion.
well, that's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of this. The kind of the difference between celebrity now and celebrity back then. That they were kind of polished and cleaned up. You didn't see all the warts. I mean, everybody's got human flaws and things, but if you can kind of clean off the rough edges and kind of accentuate the, the cool parts. It changes public perception of them. And for good or bad, we've lost that. I mean, in some ways it's good to know everybody's human, and that, no one's perfect necessarily, but that's something that's probably sacrificed as a part of that. And maybe why celebrities aren't as huge as they once were, in that golden age.
I think the world in general, well, I shouldn't say the whole world, but America perhaps, we've lost our innocence and probably more than once. But there's a lot to that. I can remember when the rose-colored glasses came off of me, and that was, I'm not going to get into details, but that was in the 90s, when my rose-colored glasses came off, and my whole world, I'm not the same person that I was. uh, and it's now, I'm not talking necessarily like nothing bad has ever happened since. I've had horrible, much worse things have happened to me subsequently, but it was just an event that was, shocking. That, man, I didn't think it happened. Just a personal thing, nothing like, that. It just, it changes you. So yeah, we've lost. I think a lot of people have lost their innocence, and I wish I could get some of that back. My naivety, naivete, however they pronounce it. Where I could be naive again. There's a street smarts is a double-edged sword. It makes you cynical. It makes you very non-trusting, and you know, it can take some of the fun out of things.
It's funny you brought up the term naive, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you said that I think that's the trade-off, and that in some ways we're more informed now. And I generally think it's better, honestly. I mean, as much as we've lost maybe some of the mystery and innocence, it comes, knowledge is power, hopefully. I just kind of think, kind of getting on the personal side. So my grandfather on my mother's side, he was an abusive alcoholic. And my mom, the way she relayed the story is, growing up this whole time, she thought that her family was the only one going through this. She had no idea that this was a common affliction, that it was something that people went through and had to deal with. So not only did she have the stress and all the hard times as a result of that, but she also had kind of shame of it and hid it. Because on TV, all she saw was like father knows best, and everything was, and everybody on the outside looked a certain way. There was kind of, like I said, she had a naive view of how the world was and how people were. And granted, she was younger then, but there's a lot of issues we deal with. It's just kind of like the idea of, they talk about how we've become more afraid and protective of our kids because we realize there's all these predators out there for children. Well, I think they were always out there, but people didn't know. Now, maybe we're exaggerating them. I think people are maybe hyper aware or afraid of them. But in some ways, it's like, it's kind of the price of knowledge, is like knowing what the real world is like. You do lose, those, like you said, the rose-colored glasses, but at least you're seeing clearly. You know what I'm saying? So there's that trade-off of like, yeah, you don't have a idealized view of the world, and you're kind of disillusioned in a lot of ways, but ultimately maybe disseminating that information, whatever it is, like I said, having a better idea of how the world really works, or the flaws of people, is ultimately for the better. Because at least when you shine a flashlight on it, whether, like I said, in my family's case, hey, alcoholism is a real problem and a lot of people deal with it, then at least you can try and deal with it as opposed to hide it. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but I was just reacting to what you were kind of saying about, it seems like people individually lose that, but I think as a society as a whole, and this has been kind of a gradual thing over time, there's just a lot of truths about the way the world works, whether it's distrust of your government, being more critical of people in authority. Like people used to just naively trust. They didn't think that the president ever lied to them, or, you know what I'm saying? I think those days are gone. It's maybe we're darker and more cynical, but I think there can be value to that too.
Well, and yeah, agreed. And conversely, people tend to romanticize the past, the good old days. Where on deeper analysis, the good old days were not very good for a lot of people. And yeah, so I think that's part of the human existence, where we're trying to create a utopia of sorts, where we think it's either out there or was out there, and if it was in the past, can I get back to that? If it's out there, can I find that? And unfortunately, there's, according to recorded human history, there has never been a utopia. There's always been, calamities and wars and, plagues and famines and, um, but remember something, most of what we know is written, except for the 20th and 21st century where it's been, recorded. Everything else is written. So the authors, put their twist, put their style to it, and can either make or break a situation. They say history is written by the winners, you know, and there could be validity to that. Uh, but yeah, for me, I try at times, and it's been such a unbelievable struggle for me to try to find contentment with all the stress that I'm under with the situations here. Uh, and this is the most difficult phase of my life, and I've had difficulties pretty much my whole life, but this is the uh, the big struggle. And I'm not going to say if I can get through this, I can get through anything, because if I get through this, then it's just take a deep breath before the next thing happens, right? Nico goes through troubles, you go through troubles, we all go through them. Uh, it's just, I've never had a phase in my life, an extended period of time of harmony. That's what I miss. I think the longest period of time that I went through where I was absolutely happy, like on the cloud, was probably 3 or 4 months. That's sad.
I think that's part of the human existence is dealing with pain, hardship, and going back to like the audiobooks. That's basically all the audiobooks that I listen to are like biographies and real life stories of people just talking about their life and their pain, their hardships, the difficulties, and how they overcame them. And to me, that's very inspirational, and I learn a lot from that. It's captivating. Um, I'm not really into like fantasy stuff. I like to hear the real stories because it's universal. Everybody goes through hardship. Some people, may have it harder than others, but the way they overcame, I think anybody can learn from that. So, and that's why I want you to do a series on just your life. I think it can be very inspirational for a lot of people.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before. Other people have too. Maybe that is something we should work on. By the way, speaking of working on projects, we had mentioned this membership program, and that's still a go. We just need a couple of where we have 4 or 5 people that we're trying to get together to put the last finishing touch. We're 3/4 of the way home, and it's just difficult to get everybody with their schedule uh, together. Um, but yeah, what you just said about you get inspiration, and I do too. And even if I don't get inspired directly, I get a sense of belonging, because I've never had that sense of family. I've never had that sense of, like uh, Rick was talking about last week about the group trainings and all of this, and you have this community, right, of like-minded people. I've always been isolated. I've always done things that basically nobody else is doing. So it's always made me kind of like a lone wolf. And when I hear other people's struggles, yeah, then I can relate. I can say, yeah, there is a community of people out there. I may not be able to reach them, but but they're out there. So I don't necessarily feel like, I'm alone. So yeah, that's good that you feel that way too, that you can listen to these people and their tribulations that they went through. Uh, yeah, I was getting captivated listening to these Orson Welles interviews because while he never talked about anything, dastardly, and I know that he's, prone to hyperbole, just listening to him talk and seeing this giant man laughing, and he lived a full life, living in Peking, living in, Spain and wherever he's been around. It's interesting. And it makes me realize, that I need to laugh more, like I used to always laugh and tell jokes and bust people's chops and, do things like that. I need to get back to that desperately, because I do believe all of us can get lost in our grief or in our sorrow or in our depression or whatever it is, the malady that we go through. It's like going through a forest, and you can get lost. If you don't make a little trail, a little path with the breadcrumbs, you may never get back out again. And I cannot allow that to happen. I cannot ever allow that to happen. So that's what I do. I try to get through this maze without getting hopelessly lost. Joe, what do you think about the idea of you being strapped down and just buzz through your hair, just shave bald? Because I'm all for that.
I was gonna say, you started off good when you're like, what do you think about being strapped down? And then it just kind of took a turn.
Well, oh my goodness. Yeah, I thinking about Rita Hayworth, with Orson Welles. What a beautiful, she was, as far as when I was growing up. Well, when I was really young, it was Farrah and, Jacqueline Smith and Cheryl Ladd and all that, Raquel Welch. But really, as a young man, it was Rita Hayworth for me, and it's just then, along came Julie Newmar along the way, and of course many others, but Julie Newmar was, the thing, and Sylvia Lewis is another one. Whoa, but yeah, I could see you strapped down and have a bevy of wonderful women that you would find very appealing. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But you're married, so you can't do that.
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny that would be an interest of mine for the radio listening, since this is being recorded. But I'll take that under advisement.
Yeah, no, I know you always talk about your wife, always.
Right. Hey, but because we always talk about women of the past, but I've got a recommendation for you now. Modern women now, like in the last 5 years. Do you know who Gal Gadot is?
Do not know.
Yeah, she's the current Wonder Woman. And so I think she's a contender, because there's been some debates. Are there any new women who have that kind of iconic beauty, classic beauty? I would say, do you know who she is, Nico? I mean, I know.
Oh, you're talking to counterculture, boy.
Okay. Well, then I'm giving you tips.
I don't.
Both of you. Occasionally, there's a time to pay attention to the mainstream. There are some benefits occasionally, and this would be one, I would argue. So this is homework for you guys for the next podcast to see thumbs up or thumbs down. So,
well, can you throw out another, because I'm drawn like my contemporary ends.
That's because yeah, I remember we talked and you're like, hey, what about Britney Spears? And I was like, wasn't that like 15 years ago? I don't know.
I don't find her.
No, but I'm just saying. Her. So I'm putting one out there.
Okay.
So that's my contribution for that topic. Do some research, and we'll discuss back on the next podcast.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, if she's young, I mean, I could be her dad's age. Right?
Joe, can't you just pull up a picture of her?
That's true. There is. I think there is this thing we can use with the technology. Let me see this worldwide.
Yeah, I'd like to see what she looks like.
You guys continue to talk, and I'll. Gal
Bridget Bardot? I know who Bridget Bardot is. Is that who you're saying?
Okay, Grandpa, hold on. I'm going to get a picture. You guys keep talking. You two. I'm gonna.
Didn't he say something like that? Didn't he, Nico, something about like Bardot or something like that? I don't know who this woman is.
So besides glasses, you need a hearing aid
Yeah,
now, or
think
actually,
it's-
no, you have.
No,
Sounded similar, but yeah, my short-term memory is gone. I think it's non-existent. So yeah, I have no idea what he said.
Well, I mean, I don't know who she. I mean, I'm not busting on it. Let me see what she looks like. I'll give you an honest answer. I got a high level of beauty here. I'm picky. I'll tell you who else there was a woman not too much longer or not too long ago. No, she was Linda Carter. Yeah, that's long ago. She's older than me. What happened here? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
she's very, very, very pretty. I don't. Yeah, she's very attractive. Sure, absolutely beautiful. Yep.
So there is a reason.
that's all.
Modern pop culture. I recommend it occasionally, and here would be an example.
I can tell you that that's heavily photoshopped.
Yeah, but I mean, there's other
gets
things
my-
too. You can only Photoshop so much. That's pretty
No,
good.
she's beautiful. I'm not saying she's not. I mean, yeah, that's a nice picture. That's not like a glamour shot. That's like a normal picture. She's very attractive. Yes.
So there you go. You guys are welcome.
How old is the woman, by the way?
Oh, I don't know. I'm assuming in her 20s, maybe 30s. I don't know.
She looked like, well, to me, I'm not good on age. She looked like she was in her 30s to me, so she's probably not. She's probably 25 or something, you know.
No, she might, yeah.
Because to me, she looks like she's about 34.
Born in 85.
Huh?
She was born in 85.
Well, then she's 36.
Oh yeah,
Close. Yeah,
you're right.
I pretty much hit it on the head. Yeah. So, all right. At least I got something right. Yeah, that's still, 20 years younger than me, basically. So, I mean,
At this point, yeah, very few are age appropriate for you, Tony, unfortunately, but maybe.
Hey, you know what? This is the thing, man. 20 years of, this ain't, that's not so bad, I guess, I mean, what do you want me to do? Go write a fan letter to like Dolly Parton? I mean, want me to go 20 years the other direction? Come on.
She's very popular now. She's come back. She's having
She should be popular. She's cool.
Yeah. She funded a bunch of vaccine stuff, right? She did a lot of she's still doing good work. So good for her.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is kind of funny, but I've always been around older people. You know that, right? Being raised by my grandparents in that circle. And even Kevin, who got killed, was almost 20 years older than me, my best buddy. I've always been with the older people. That's why when I tell people most of my friends are dead, yeah, because they were all 20 years older than me or more. So that's another reason why hanging with them and talking about the old stuff, the old, Angie Dickinson and Sophia Loren and all that. Those are the types of women that, I just was always, that appealed to me even as a little kid, because that's pretty much what I saw, with the exception of, when Charlie's Angels came on. Then I'm like, well, even of course they were a lot older than me, but not as old as, Angie Dickinson and, what have you. But yeah, very.
Well, the good news is they're always making new ones. So.
Yeah, but it just seems so much better when I was the younger one. They were older. It just seemed more, I don't know. I feel weird being my age and, finding somebody 35 years old, attractive. I kind of feel like, man, I'm not a dirty old man. I mean, at least.
You'll never be president that way.
I don't want to be president, man. I just want to be left alone. I don't know how many more people I have to tell that to. Leave me alone. I mean, not all alone. I mean, leave me alone on Gilligan's Island with Ginger and Marianne. That's the kind of alone I want to be.
That's appropriate, but
yeah, well, I mean,
Actually, didn't we lose Ginger?
No, Marianne.
Marianne, that's right.
Don Wells passed away right around Christmas, which was a shame. Yeah, Dawn. Well, Tina Louise, who played Ginger, is still with us. She's just, I don't know where she lives. I knew that she was living in New York. I don't know where she's living currently. I don't keep in touch with her, but
I'm sure Mrs. Howell didn't even, she was already on death's bed probably during the show. I don't know what happened with her.
yeah, she passed away. Natalie Schaefer. She passed away quite a few years ago. And Mr. Howell, her husband, who voiced Mr. Magoo, was from Cleveland. He lived in Bracknell, Ohio, as was Burgess Meredith Mickey. He was another Clevelander. Kind of interesting. Just figured I'd
Penguin, yeah. I like Burgess Meredith.
throw that out there. Yeah, Cleveland had honest to God, now getting back to me being an actor, I should have done that because Cleveland actually has a great uh, theater thing, Cleveland Playhouse and everything. And there was opportunities. I never thought about it even, but there could have been, and it may have been a little easier to break in Cleveland and then launch to, either New York or Chicago or what have you. But, once again, man, there was never any guidance in my life. Nobody telling me go here, go there. It was just, I wish, if I could turn back the hands of time, I wish. Um, Cleveland's a very interesting town. Had a lot of, uh, a great African American scene with the, I believe it was the Caramoo Theater or Caramoo House. I could be wrong. I'm going on memory now. And had great for music. Cleveland Institute of Music is one of the finer classical music schools. In the country, and the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra is generally regarded as the world's finest symphony orchestra. Cleveland has a lot of culture. Not that Chicago or others don't, but people tend to overlook that. Um,
Not to forget
I
Drew
do,
Carey. Isn't Drew Carey from Cleveland?
well, yeah, Drew Carey. I mean, Jane Kennedy, who used to be Miss USA or something, and you never hear of her anymore. One of the guys I used to play music with actually went to high school with her. Here's another raving beauty, Halle Berry. She's from Cleveland, suburb.
I didn't know that. My buddy
Absolutely.
Dwayne is crazy about her.
Well, so am I. She's my age. I think she may be a year younger than I am. And Arsenio Hall, Steve Harvey, who wasn't actually born in Cleveland but went to high school, was raised in Cleveland, I guess you'd say. Uh, yeah, there was Paul Newman, of course. Was the most famous. Bob Hope, actually, is probably even the more famous. Bob Hope was actually born in England, but came to Cleveland when he was a baby and raised in Cleveland. Literally used to box like his where it used to be like my backyard made a right angle to the place. So literally, I literally could say that like Bob Hope was in my backyard almost, honest to God. It was like right there. Just hop the fence and I would have been on their property. Um, where he boxed years and years ago. A lot of people don't know that he boxed a little bit. And Dean Martin boxed, but he was out of Steubenville, Ohio, which is closer to the Pennsylvania border by Youngstown. But yeah, Cleveland had a few others. There used to be Tony Bennett, who's not from Cleveland, but he sang in Cleveland a lot in the beginning. Art Tatum, who some consider the greatest jazz pianist of all time. Born in Toledo, got his musical start really in the clubs in Cleveland, Ohio. Interesting stuff. Everybody thinks, it's always Chicago or New York or LA, but there's a lot of towns in this country that,
Well, I
gave
do think,
people.
kind of talking about creative ideas, is I do think you should do a YouTube channel for jazz and also for Cleveland, honestly. Just little videos of stuff about it. Start up a parallel thing. You'd be surprised, just people talking about records that they like or whatever, and get that out, because I think there's interest out there. And, there's probably a community of people. I know there's obviously Cleveland's a town with there's Facebook groups out there that I see and keep an eye on. And a lot of that stuff, I think there's an audience for it.
Well, I got to get back to my YouTube channel too. I've been amiss, the last couple of weeks here because I've just been tied up. I've lost touch with Cleveland. I don't go back to Cleveland. So anything that I would do Cleveland based would be like memories of Cleveland. You know, it would be my memories of Cleveland. You know, Kay Ballard, who you guys probably don't know, she was a big star. She died about 3 years ago. She was another one from Cleveland, and she was an Italian, and Ballard was her stage name. Um, Cleveland to this day has like the fifth or sixth most. There's more Italians per capita in Cleveland than there is in Chicago. That's a fact. And Cleveland is like sixth or seventh in the country for Italians, Italian Americans. The East Coast, Connecticut, and all of that, New York, they have more. But and Cleveland has generally accepted as the finest Little Italy in America, Murray Hill. And it's again, yeah. See, yeah, you're right. I should probably, do a YouTube channel. But again, I don't keep up with Cleveland. I haven't been to Cleveland in quite a few years. You and I need to take that road trip, and I'd like to get Nico too. But with his work schedule, I don't know. But we need to go for a long weekend to Cleveland, Joe, for sure.
Oh yeah, can't wait to check it out.
That'd be a good reality episode.
Episode 2, yeah.
Tony's cruise through Cleveland.
Yeah, right. I'd love it, and like I said, they tore my house down, so we can still go down the neighborhood. Yeah, that would be great. And I could show you everything, like here, I got jumped over here. Here's what this happened, that happened. And then I could still take you to the beautiful Brattonall with the mansions that look like Beverly Hills. I got a tickle in my throat. We'd have to get a Roman burger at Mr. Heroes. That's absolute. And if Royal Pizza's still around, we're getting that. And then just have fun. Oh, and excuse me, Jesus, Slyman's corned beef. I know a lot of places are gone, since I was there. These places are still there. I don't know about Royal Pizza, but Mr. Heroes is a chain, so I know they're there. Let's go.
All right.
Pack up all our cares and woes. Here I go singing low. We need to go. We need to go to Cleveland, man. We really do. That would do me well. I remember years ago you wanted to go with Ben, but I'm like, Ben's not 21. You can't really. There's places that I like to take you that you have to be 21.
Yeah, you don't want to be Cleveland and be sober. That's true.
Hey, that's true. But the people are very friendly. It's kind of like a unique little town. I don't know the West Side. I did take some friend of mine from Chicago there. We had to stay on the West Side because we couldn't get a room anywhere else. That was back in the heyday of the Cleveland Indians. We went to catch an Indians game, so you couldn't even book a motel room. We had a problem. And I ended up meeting a very lovely lady that owned a tavern, and we stayed in touch for a while. She came to visit me here in Chicago, and it was a bit, but I don't know the West Side. So I'm an East Sider, so I'll take you all around the East Side, bro.
All right, so that's episode 2 of the Tony Cecchine reality show.
Yeah, right. Eastbound and down, baby. Just like Jerry Reed saying, we're eastbound and down.
All right. So do we got any closing thoughts as we come to the winding down the show? Any?
Well, I don't know. I actually kind of liked today's show. I mean, it's just nice for some reason. I felt more relaxed. I just, we talk about a variety of subjects here. And let me just add that, I do get emails now and then from people that I've never met that are going through struggles, that are going through very desperate times, not because of COVID or anything, but just they lost their mother, they lost their wife, or their job, or this or that. And, always people can reach out to me if I can give them any words of inspiration, fine. But don't be ashamed to reach out for help. If anybody, like, Nico was talking about earlier, you get caught up in things, looking for inspiration. you know, don't be afraid of any stigma of saying you have depression or anxiety or whatnot. You know, call a helpline or look on the internet for maybe groups that you can tie up with, or see if you can just talk to a mental health professional. Many counselors have sliding scales financially. So if you don't have insurance, they'll work with you, and you may find a good one who'll even say, look, all right, you can come and talk to me like once maybe, for free. And always reach out. Don't you're not alone. Anybody who's out there who's suffering with anything, you're not the only one. And I don't mean that as to diminish what you're going through. That's hope for you. Know that there's other people out there, and they're probably looking for you too. So you can form that community and feel better and get better, because we're only here for a short ride. So let's enjoy that ride as best we can. That's pretty much my closing thoughts.
I think that's a good message. All right, cool. Well, it's good to have see you guys again. Great to have Nico back.
Yeah, we miss you, Nico.
Miss
So,
you guys.
so hopefully we'll have you for the next one too, and we'll go from there.
All right, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Goodbye, guys.
Bye.